Hi, I'm Amanda Valko. I'm a professional archaeologist, just like my husband Brian. And we have been doing our public archaeology program here at Clear Creek State Park since 2005, which makes this the 20th year. And we have an archaeological site. It's a blacksmith shop. It's site 36JE73, meaning that it is the 36 stands for the state of Pennsylvania, JE stands for Jefferson County, and 73 means it was the 73rd site registered here in Jefferson County. Nails, pieces, 19 new top soil to get to later colored brick on multiple chain links, long as brick and other metal pieces.
Piece of coal.
So there's a lot of oral histories that were in the Park Museum so whenever I got here, you read through all of those. One of our rangers, Paul Stoll, had done a map of the creek where they had found mill sites, bracket dam locations, things like that. And then shortly after 2000, Gary Gilmore was contacted by Jenny Phillips, who was the last of the Fraziers. And so he was able to get some photos from her of the Frazier mill sites. And so we were here looking at those pictures and trying to get a good idea of where those mills actually physically sat. And as we walked around this area, Gary pulled up some oxen shoes, and he said, this is probably where the blacksmith shop was, because there is no blacksmith shop in that picture. So the mystery started. Was it or wasn't it? Or was it just where some ox threw their shoes? So.
I'm Gary Gilmore. I live in Luthersburg, Pennsylvania, and interested in history. And I worked as a forester on the Clear Creek State Forest for about 20 years. Part of my career, and being interested in history and logging, I pursued that by knowing how they work timber. Also, before I became a forester, I was a blacksmith. Did that for about 15 years full-time. Still have a blacksmith shop and do iron work there. So I have a knowledge of the production of iron and forging and producing it. Being in the state forest, I would come into the state park occasionally to help with programs and such. And there's this rock right here with an iron ring in it. And that caught my attention right away. Now this is back, when I first started working here. And people would find artifacts and they'd lay them on this rock. So you'd find a piece of bent metal, maybe some nails and such. And just looking at the site, I could feel that this was a blacksmith shop. Because I had done that previous to my being a forester. So I knew how a blacksmith shop would be laid out, and these are definitely artifacts from a blacksmith shop. The iron ring, that'd be for tying animals too. And just the feeling about this site indicated to me, this is a blacksmith shop. This is the Frazier Sawmill. And a lady contacted me from Hawaii who had a picture of her family, and she told me her great-great-grandfather's name was Frazier. And she had no use for these pictures, and she wanted to send them back, somewhere where they'd be appreciated. And it had on it the new Clarington Mill. And I carried that picture with me for about a year, trying to figure out where is this sawmill. And you can see in the picture the oxen and the men with wheelbarrows building a new dam across the stream somewhere. Well, one day I drove here into Clear Creek. It was in the spring before the leaves were out, and I looked across the valley and it says, that's it. So here was a picture, ladies in hoop skirts. So this dates it to around 1870s, 80s. And here is a brand new water power sawmill being built as they're actually, you can see the guys wheeling the wheelbarrows across, filling in the dam with stone. So I knew that is the location of the sawmill. But I'd already known about this area for a blacksmith shop. Now the two came together. aha, there's a sawmill. This would be the blacksmith shop used to support that mill and the lumbering operations, where they use mainly oxen to pull the trees from the forest to the sawmill to be cut and then taken down the river to Pittsburgh. White pine was the preferred species because it made some very nice, lightweight, fairly strong lumber. This lumber here they would cut into boards to give it added value, because they could also send round logs down the river and then a sawmill down there could cut them. But why do that when you can cut them here and make more value? So they would cut them into boards, and they had two options then. One is to make a board raft, and then they would float down to Pittsburgh, which was the gateway to the west. There was a huge demand in Pittsburgh for the building of steamboats, for the mining of coal, for timber props, for pilings, for piers. The iron industry was going great guns down in Pittsburgh, and they needed places to, big factories, and they were largely built out of wood. Some of this lumber was used to build barges. And actually down here at Clear Creek, they had what's called a tipple, where they would build the boat upside down. It'd be 20 feet wide and about 100 feet long. And they would lay the planks out, the gunnels, they nail these boards down, they caulk them with oakum. Then these tipples, which would be hanging out over the river, would then, there'd be 11 guys on ropes, and they'd all work in unison to bring this boat up on its side and then lower it into the river. And then they would load it with more lumber so they could build up the sides once it got down to Pittsburgh. And they float these down there in the spring. It was a big industry on the Clarion and parts of the upper Allegheny River. Nowhere else in Pennsylvania did they really do this, but here it was a huge business. There are, I don't know, maybe 20 boat scaffolds up and down the Clarion River that supplied Pittsburgh with these barges. Very value added to the lumber that came off of these hillsides, but mostly white pine. Yep. So we are about, half a mile from the Clarion River. And in the True Tales of the Clarion River and other documentation, they did not use steam to take the boards down to the river. They used carts pulled by horses. And in this picture, you can see two horses lined up with a lumber cart. They would coast these lumber carts full of boards down to the mouth of Clear Creek, where the Clarion River was, and then they would assemble them either into board rafts or they would make barges to be then floated down to Pittsburgh, where then they would build sides on them, fill them with coal, send them further down to Louisiana. Well, the logs to sawmill was by animal power. Now, this was early on, and the primary mode was using oxen, because oxen were steady in the woods, they could pull a lot of weight, they didn't need a lot of feed. Like a horse needs oats and hay, whereas cattle, you can feed them leaves off of trees. I mean, they're a much more robust animal, but they're slow. So early on in the lumbering in this area, they used oxen. And I guess at this site you found mostly ox shoes. Now later on in the 1890s, this was the second industrialization of the woods, they used horses. But you only found a couple horseshoes here. So this indicates this is a part of that early Frazier mill where they used mostly oxen.
This actually is a professional archaeological dig, but it's designed to have volunteer help. And so what we try to do is we try to give our volunteers a little bit of information about the blacksmith shop and the sawmills in the area, and then we show them how to dig just like archaeologists dig. They get to dig, they get to screen the dirt, they get to do the paperwork, we let them do the mapping, Brian lets them survey points in, and we have had a lot of volunteers over the last 20 years of all ages, including small children or young children up through grandparents that come to our dig. We are focusing on the forge area today. We'd like to uncover the base of the forge and see if we can get an idea of the size and shape of it, and we'll let the park decide what they want to do with that forge area once we're done.
So this was a very remote area. There are no machine shops around, and a blacksmith shop was very critical to any lumbering operations, to maintaining the logging equipment, the sawmill equipment. They've even found babbitt here used to re-babbitt the machinery that gets worn out over time and make new bearings. So critically important part of this operation.
So when we began the excavation here at Clear Creek, our idea of what a blacksmith shop looked like was taken from the common village blacksmith. So every town and village had a blacksmith, and some of the larger towns had more than one blacksmith. And these blacksmiths were typically proprietors of their blacksmith shop. Often these were substantial buildings. They had stone walls, and some of them were brick, and they were pretty well built. It's because the blacksmith owned it. It was his main livelihood. And he often, because it was like his second home, he often had his meals in the blacksmith shop. So there was some, typically in archaeological excavations of the village blacksmith, they find some dinnerware and those kinds of things. It was also a bit of a social center. It was a warm place in the winter where people could come in and get the community gossip. But here, at this blacksmith shop, that's not what we're finding. We found that the construction of the building was very expedient. It appears that they just laid logs on the ground and built up from those logs. There's no stone foundation, there are no posts put into the ground for the building. This is typical of lumber camps in the kind of greater Allegheny National Forest region, where these lumber camps, they knew they weren't going to be here long. Once the trees were cut down and stripped bare from the valley, they would pick up and move. So they didn't spend a lot of money building solid buildings, and that's the case with this blacksmith shop. We also find very little dinnerware, any kind of domestic wares, suggesting that the blacksmith was having meals in his shop. So this tells us that the blacksmith at this shop probably was a member of the crew, an employee of the lumber camp, and he was likely having his meals wherever the rest of the lumber camp employees were having their meals. So all the artifacts we're finding kind of speak of the lumber industry instead of the kind of artifacts you would find in the village blacksmith shop. So this tells us that there are different kinds of blacksmiths, and each industry had their own blacksmith that was specialized to the tools and the needs of that industry.
Some of the artifacts that we have found include a lot of rusty metal. Of course, it's a blacksmith shop, so you're going to have that, but some of it you can't tell what it is. Others, we have square cut nails, we have oxen shoes, we have chain links. Of course, the oxen had these yokes that had chains on them. We have some hooks, we have some lumber industry tools. What else? Probably a lot of it's stock metal that the blacksmith, had on hand. We also have a lot of brick. We have some window glass, so we're hoping to be able to tell where the windows were in the blacksmith shop. We also have some crockery, like maybe a jug. And we also have parts of a smoking pipe. So, did that belong to our blacksmith? We don't know. We also don't know what the name of our blacksmith was. We're hoping that once we do some of the background research and delve into the state archives, we might find some material from the blacksmith shop, maybe a ledger or something that tells us who the workers were here. That would be really cool. So, since this is state property, the collection will eventually, hopefully, go to the State Museum in Harrisburg, where artifact collections are curated. And hopefully some of the items will eventually be displayed in the little museum here at Clear Creek State Park.
Okay, good.
We've had all kinds of volunteers and all kinds of excited kids when they find something like an oxen shoe or, you know, some kind of chain link from the forge. And so everybody seems to have a lot of fun, and we hope that we have taught a lot of people more about archaeology and what archaeologists do.
Oh boy, there's so much to add. All the faces and the people and the interest that was garnished from it. You know, staff asking questions. You know, they would tease about the blue tarp.
Yeah, the blue tarp's a sore subject.
The blue tarp. They would tease me about, oh, what scraps of metal did you find this weekend, Suzanne? You know, but they were interested. That was just their way of asking about it. And yeah, just the many faces that have, you know.
It's a good thing to have the archaeology part finished, especially since it took 20 years. But we did it with volunteers, and we got to meet a lot of great people. We hope everybody had fun, whoever participated in the dig here. And we hope people learned something too about archaeology and also about the blacksmith shop and the sawmills located here in the park.
Okay, that's good. I like that.